I'm so grateful and honored to introduce Paul Chabot, who is a former US Congressional candidate from California who is now living here in Texas. He is retired from law enforcement and runs a counter-terrorism consulting firm while serving in the Navy Reserves as a rank of commander. He is an author, an adjunct professor, and has a doctorate in leadership. Paul is married with 4 children, and he worked in the White House in the Office of National Drug Control Policy and later served as commissioner for a California parole board. He founded the Coalition for Drug-Free California, and since moving to Texas, he has established the Coalition for Drug-Free Texas. Paul is a national speaker, having presented in 48 states. He is also passionate about keeping kids off drugs and fighting against drug legalization. He went through drug rehab in his youth and has over 35 years of sobriety and drug prevention experience. So we are so honored to have him here today. I have gotten to know Paul personally. I have fought alongside of him against policies that harm our children and our families. And I'm honored that I've gotten that opportunity to do that. And Paul, we're so grateful to hear from you tonight. Thank you for being here. The floor is yours.
Aubrey, thanks. And I want to thank you as well. What people don't understand about the effort on talking about drugs or alcohol is, there's actually not a lot of people doing it from a national perspective. Look, there's a lot of money in combating tobacco, right? Some states have extra taxes that go towards ads for tobacco or alcohol. But there's really not a lot out there talking about the dangers of marijuana. And so to me, before I get into other stuff, it's like a Twilight Zone episode every day. I'm beside myself and let's just talk policy for a minute, because this impacts all of our lives, no matter where you live in this country right now, that there is just a huge disconnect between the effort to get people to quit tobacco and the effort to quit marijuana. For example, in my home state of California, they legalized marijuana at 16. And yet still today, they're trying to get people to stop smoking tobacco on the beaches or stop doing all this and all that. But you cannot get them to discuss marijuana. And I'll just be honest with you. There's a lot of money in it. It's a huge industry. And quite honestly, we are outnumbered, outgunned, outfunded. And a lot of us that get in this fight, we're just ordinary moms or dads. We're not lobbyists. We're not, there's not a lot of us. And when you do bring people into what we do, what Aubrey does, what you do, what you begin to realize is that our ranks are really thin. And being in this battle, whether you're trying to save a family member, save your community, you largely feel somewhat alone, because that's just where we are. And that's why what Aubrey's doing is so important, because obviously there's a crisis in this country. It's a drug crisis. So look, we talk a lot about fentanyl, right? Here I am in North Texas. Everybody's talking about fentanyl now, getting Narcan in the schools. But once again, we are completely just like taking marijuana and just putting it somewhere on the side as if we're afraid to talk about it. And I know we're not here, but I want to that is where we are in this world, in this country. And so when your child or young adult loved one is dealing with marijuana and addiction, not only are they dealing with all of those very personal issues and you're dealing with them, but they're living in a society that hasn't really embraced this as a public health crisis. And until we get there and stop talking about marijuana as something in your 1970s of Cheech and Chong of 1 to 3% THC, society is going to continue to go down this road of, it's really not harmful. Well, it is. And this disconnect is what you have testimony for. You see your loved ones suffering. You see the impact in your household or just across this country. And so, I think we can make a huge impact. I just don't know if we're there yet. And I'll give you an example. I think the LA Times on March 23rd, if you go back and research, I think Aubrey might have tagged that article or I saw it reposted again today. But the article from the LA Times, which, by the way, embraced marijuana legalization in 2016, along with the California Medical Association. Big surprise, unfortunately. The argument was, well, if we legalize marijuana, we're going to do away with cartels. We'll be able to do more regular, whatever it is. Well, no, if you read that article, the headline is basically, this is a disaster. What happened? The cartels moved into California. They're already there. Now they're really there. They're controlling most of the trafficking, the production. And now that marijuana is making its way into other states that have not yet legalized it. And now we're dealing with CBD, and parents don't know what this is. Here in Texas, you have quasi-legalization with CBD in our stores right now. Parents don't know what it is. Where I live in this small, not small, but McKinney, 200,000 people, we have more CBD stores here than we do Starbucks. Who's buying this stuff? Well, just park your car out front and look at who's coming in and out and what are they buying and where are they going. So these mental health implications of the psychosis is real. And look, I'm a veteran as well, actually retired now from the Navy, 21 years. The part that really upsets me is that when people talk about legalization, they try to find groups of people that they can stand on the backs of to raise the flag about why they should legalize. So for my veteran community, those who want to legalize and legitimize marijuana have stood on the backs of veterans with PTSD to tell them that, hey, go smoke pot, don't take pills. That's their message. But dealing with, and I've got PTSD and I'm in groups and nobody in my group smokes pot. And the one or two that have come in occasionally that have talk about it just being a disaster. We know it's a disaster. In the veteran community, we have a huge suicide rate. Well, what is marijuana? It's a depressant, but it also has all these other effects. And so this is not good for veterans. It's not good for anybody. And there has to be a way that we address society in this to tell them that, look, this is not your grandparents' pot of the 1960s. It is highly addictive and dangerous. Yeah, there's a ton of money in it. And there is just very little national leadership on this issue. So what happens? It's you, it's the parents. Your stories, wherever you are, make an impact. And if I can be so bold as to encourage you to write a 700-word editorial about your experience and send it off to the New York Times, the LA Times, USA Today, and try to get these stories published. Look, this is almost like a big Navy ship at sea. You can't turn a huge aircraft carrier on a dime. Do I think we've begun to turn a little bit? Yes. But we're not nearly where we need to be. We don't have enough people on this ship with us. We're all here, if you will, just trying to keep the ship afloat so we don't hit an iceberg and sink with our kids. 1 out of 5 kids on average right now in our schools are using illicit drugs. And we celebrate or honor Red Ribbon Week, but really it's 1 week. We should be doing this every single day. If you've seen the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., you know how many names are on that wall? I think about 59,000 for a multi-year war where Americans lost their lives. Well, you can double that, and that's how many we lose in this country every single year just to substance abuse-related incidents. And marijuana is almost always at the starting point for people's problems and where they get into. So first off, for those that are parents, let me say, this is very difficult. And I'll tell you why, because once you get your son or daughter, there's inpatient, outpatient. I was in an inpatient drug rehabilitation facility. I went to NA and AA. I still participate. I love hearing the Serenity Prayer. But there's on average about a 90% plus relapse, or I'll just say failure rate. And people will often say that relapse is part of recovery. I'm not going to argue that either way, but I will say it's preventable, and this is a disease. The problem for your son or daughter is even if they go through treatment, they're going back into society. And it's on Facebook, social media, the community, the college campuses are horrible for this. They're going back into an environment where this is extremely acceptable, mainstream, fun, and appears harmless. So when I was working on my dissertation, there was something that I wrote about. It was called the rubber band theory. So I don't have a rubber band, but I pulled this off my wife's desk. It's a little hair thing. This, I hope, will make an impact with you as we think about drugs and just human beings. So human beings, we are all kind of wired in a particular shape. Now, when you get your son or daughter into treatment, what are you doing? You're stretching their mind, their views, and hopefully getting them to be able to understand the challenges to themselves. The problem is most insurance companies only paid, like when I went through rehab, they paid for 28 days or 30 days. That's not really long enough. And it's not the end. It's actually just the very beginning. And so if you want to help people, it's anything, homelessness, drugs, you name it, this rubber band theory goes to everything. And that is, you've got to be able to keep them on a long-term treatment plan with continued intervention, at least weekly meetings, if not more, surrounding themselves with good people. And if you do that long enough and you put a rubber band on two pegs long enough, right? If you do that long enough, and you take it off, it's going to keep its shape. It's changed. The problem is society, we check the box for rehab, right? Where their mind's been changed and they get out of rehab and they go right back to college or wherever it is, they're going to get right back into those problems again. When you look at the 12 steps of NA and AA, I was never one that worked them the way that my sponsor said I should. I did things a little bit differently. But one of those is you got to get rid of your using friends. And that is so hard to do, especially for a teenager or somebody in college. And I know this because I went to college. Look, I didn't drink in college. I was in a fraternity. And, but I was at a point in my life where it didn't impact me because I already had a number of years under my belt. So I could be in a college fraternity. I could go to all the parties. I was always the designated driver, right? And what I found was other people around me that came into college didn't want to drink either. And when they saw somebody else that wasn't drinking, it kind of built a neat little network within that network, which is why it's important to be able to find other people. And let me bring this in about faith. So last night I posted, and I don't want to get real political, but I just want to say something. For whatever reason, people, there's things that happen in our world publicly and we get upset at them, right? Like right now, there's people upset at Bud Light. Well, I took it a step further last night on a post and said, okay, put that aside about Bud Light. How about just don't drink at all? Do we really need alcohol? And not that I'm criticizing people that drink. I've got friends and family that do, not my immediate family here where I live. But what we know through research is that when you take any intoxicant, you really open yourself up to doing things you wouldn't normally do. So when I was in law enforcement or state parole board commissioner, what we found was most people that were in prison or that were arrested had a drug in their system or were under the influence of something. And from a faith perspective, let me just say this, the Bible talks about really keeping our mind and body pure. And that when we are intoxicated, it opens us up to the evils coming in and allowing things to happen that really wouldn't happen if we were sober. So there really is a strong faith-based component, I think, to sobriety, which is why it sort of plays into sobriety. Even if people might not be religious, they find a higher power, right? I was in rehab and if somebody's higher power was the mountains, great. For me, it was Jesus Christ. So we've got to find that higher power and cling to it. But also, as a parent or a loved one, this is a journey that will last your entire life with that person. So when you think about people going through rehab or treatment, remember there's about a 90% relapse or failure rate. And it's so important for them. Look, if they don't want it, they're not going to have it. And that's a very direct, brutal, honest take. If they don't want it, they're not going to have it. Sometimes they're forced to. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I know somebody here mentioned somebody getting locked up 5150. That's usually a 3-day hold. If they're not a threat to themselves or others, they're pushed right back out. But let's say somebody's caught for drugs, under the influence or some other drug crime. In society now, we have something that's been around for a few decades called the drug court program. And that is actually probably one of the most effective programs in the country at actually helping to address this disease. And the reason is that if you don't know about the drug court program, check it out. It's remarkable. It has probably the highest success rate when we talk about keeping people away from alcohol and other drugs. And the reason is this: there is a carrot and a stick approach to this. That if you get caught for a drug alcohol related incident, you get a chance to go before either one or two judges, a judge that can put you in jail or a judge that can help you work a program through the drug treatment program. Now you've got an option of what you don't have to do the drug court program in most areas. You can go, nope, judge, don't want that. I'll just go do my time or take the program, whatever it is. But for those that choose the drug court program, it is extremely effective. And the reason is it's not a one-time in front of the judge and see you later. This is oftentimes a year-long program where you have to get drug tested. You got to get a job. You got to go through counseling. You got to show up before that drug court judge. And so what you're doing, right? You're keeping that stretched long enough. And that's why that program has one of the higher success rates. Now, unfortunately, some states have gutted their drug court program. Like in California, they still have it, but they've removed the carrot and stick approach. And that's why I think that program is largely not as effective as other states, because if you don't have a carrot and stick with an addict in this, then I'm not going to say you're wasting your time, but you're wasting your time, because an addict is an addict is an addict, and they need that direct sort of intervention. So what's great about this drug court program is, as a family member or community, you don't have to have somebody necessarily get arrested. Just go look at what the drug court program does and try to mimic that with your loved one. Let me talk a little bit about drug testing. In the military, back in the Vietnam Plus era, well over 50% of our military personnel were using illicit drugs. Today, it's less than 1/2 of 1%. It's so tiny. And why is it so small today? It's because of drug testing. The military has led the way now for quite some time in drug testing. And what's great about this drug testing program, and what the military realized, is when you drug test, you give that soldier, sailor, airman an out to say, hey, well, I might like to do that drug at the bar on Liberty, but I don't want to test positive and lose my career, right? So it gives them an out in peer pressure. Many schools drug test. And I'm talking non-punitive, right? It's really important we talk about that non-punitive aspect for kids. And it's largely in your extracurricular programs. And again, what research has shown now for well over 2 decades, since I left the White House in 2005, is that research is clear that kids actually like it because it gives them an out in those peer pressure programs. Well, here in McKinney, Texas, if you go to drugfreemckinney.org, we signed up with a local drug testing company here in McKinney, where any parent can take their kid, whether they homeschool, private school, or whatever, and just randomly go take them into this drug testing location to get drug tested. They're offering a discounted rate. If you have a community coalition, or even if you don't, I recommend just go surprise your kid and don't worry about violating their trust, because you'd rather feel bad about violating their trust than having them end up in trouble or dead, right? But so let's talk about this. 1 out of 5 kids on average uses. So if you test your kids, there's a chance they could test positive. Well, then what do? I'm not going to go down the road medically. I'll just, from a liability perspective, I'll just say you need to talk to your family doctor at least about, look, my kid tested positive. What do we do? There's other resources out there, but I don't want to go down that road because I'm not a medical doctor. Certainly have been down the road of addiction myself. But at least now it gives you an eye opener. And oh, by the way, we drug test our kids. We do. And no shame in it. I've got 3 teenagers in my house and one who's 10. And what age should you start drug testing? Middle school, at least. High school, it's too late. You've got to get them while they're young, especially in these areas where drugs is so prevalent. And, obviously marijuana is extremely dangerous, but the DEA has a new slogan out for fentanyl, which is 1 pill can kill. There's no such thing as experimenting anymore. And kids who vape today, they could think they're vaping THC or some other drug. And little do they know that it's got that little tiny bit of fentanyl, which at the very tip of that pen can kill you. 3 cities over from us, we just had 3 kids die, school-age kids from fentanyl. We have had parents come into our meetings here, our community anti-drug meetings, and say their children have died from fentanyl. When you talk to parents whose kids are using a lot of hard drugs, have not come across fentanyl intentionally, it's about marijuana. And that's where this begins. And so, this is just one of those moments in our society where I would have thought by now we would have certainly had a concerted effort around marijuana. Here in Texas, I think I'm finally seeing some national highway traffic safety signs up about don't drive high, which is nice, quote unquote. But how about the dangers of what it does to the body and to the brain? Why are we not communicating these things? Here in Texas, we have a state agency, Health and Human, HHSC. It's the equivalent of your feds at HHS. But at the national level, you have a federal agency, Office of National Drug Control Policy, that largely conducts policy around these issues. And I will say today, I don't know if they are as effective as they were 20 years ago. And this was really a non-political issue. Both sides back then, I worked in both the Clinton White House and the Bush White House, where we all agreed keeping kids off drugs was the right thing to do. For some reason, there is a disconnect today. And that's why your editorials, your experience speaking about this is absolutely a critical place for us to go. So with that, I've talked a lot. I'd be happy to answer questions or go on to some other related topics. Aubrey?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I really love that. I mean, every word glued to it. And Paul, I couldn't agree with you more. Does anybody have a question for Paul?
Go ahead, Laura.
Oh, okay. I do live in Texas. I live in San Antonio. What would be the best place for me to go? I like the idea of writing an article. What is a way for me to get active locally?
So tell me again the city that in the county or the part of Texas?
San Antonio, Bexar County.
Yep. Aubrey may have some connections as well. That's about 4 hours out of my region. I will say there are a number of state-funded efforts, but I might also look at what are called your federal-funded drug-free community coalitions, which are DFCs. I will take a look at this as I'm entertaining the next question, but I think it's about 400 or 500 drug-free community coalitions across America. And one website to consider looking at might be CADCA, C-A-D-C-A, for Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. They might have the latest listing of where your drug-free communities are. San Antonio probably has a number of them around a bubble area. But Aubrey, are you aware of anything in the San Antonio area?
I'm not, but I mean, we can help. Lauren, it's been a little bit since we've spoken, and it's good to see you. With Every Brain Matters or Citizens for Safe and Healthy Texas, I have 2 organizations. We can support you on that. So if you wouldn't mind, I know I have your email, but if you wouldn't mind putting it in the chat again, we can talk more about how to raise your voice here in Texas. And we are watching the bills that they're presenting too. So we are looking for people to do public testimonies. We're working with Smart Approach to Marijuana, and we're trying to line up some parents to go oppose policies that they're pushing here. So if you're interested in that, just remind me again of your email so I can.
Yes, we'll reconnect. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Paul.
Yeah, Laura, absolutely. Since you're somewhat close to Austin in a way, having you be able to provide your testimony during some of these bills. There's a lot coming up in Texas right now that from an education perspective to legislators about what it is that they're actually looking at and what could potentially impact, and things that you see make a difference. The problem is, like I said, the first few minutes of this presentation, those of us that are doing the educating on it, it's us. We're largely volunteers. moms or dads. We're up against well-paid lobbyists. There's a ton of money into legalizing and pushing pot. On average, a marijuana store can make over $1 million a year in California. That was prior to legalization. I think now there's so many pot stores are actually losing money because they're competing with one another, which I don't feel sad about at all. But here in Texas, it's a huge state. And if they go down that road, there's a lot of people who will make a lot of money. And so helping educators or legislators and their staff understand the policy implications of what's happening and what you see is really, really important.
Yeah.
So thanks, Laura. Lauren, I think you had a question as well.
My question, I guess, is more, all the gaps that I have found. For instance, you had said, you do testing, or I've read all these articles. How do you know if your kid is smoking cannabis or whatever? You want to protect them, but you find out what you've said, go to the doctor. I've just been so disappointed, with all the specialists and professionals that I have access to, that people they kind of shrug, like they don't know what to do. And that's the frustrating thing. And then now that I've shifted from, someone who's under 18 to over 18, that's the other frustrating thing, is they can't talk to you. You can't be an advocate for them. It makes it very difficult. And they get to make their own decisions. And so I guess, like I said, I'm on the front end of my journey here. And I'm just hitting so many roadblocks. And I'm very fortunate because I have, great resources with insurance and coverage and all that kind of stuff. It's just this big gap of what do you do? What do you do before it's too late? Once they, they're hooked and that's their program, So it does scare me though, what you say about the vape pens, because that's a big part of this. And it's probably Russian roulette with, getting something laced in there that you aren't intended to receive. So.
Yeah, that is. And, it's funny, just because somebody has a PhD or a MD by their name, doesn't necessarily mean that they know these specific issues. And so it really is finding those professionals, which is what, Aubrey and her network growing and the resources is so important here, so important now, and it will be important for our lifetime. And I just want to prepare you, Lauren, that oftentimes with people that are using drugs, sometimes they got to hit rock bottom. And you've heard that a million times. But, rock bottom in today's times could mean not coming back. Not that we wish or want, but you are on a roller coaster ride, and it's not fair to any parent. It's the ride that I don't mean to minimize it by calling it a ride, but that's how you got to look at it. There's going to be ups and downs. And quite honestly, this is going to go on for the rest of your life, because drug addiction is a disease. If it's impacting him now, it's going to impact him down the road, whether it's peer pressure or something else. And people do absolutely come out of this. But the worst thing we could do is give you any false hope. You are in war. You are in a battlefield, and it's ugly. And things are going to hit you out of left and the right, and it's not going to be pretty. And there might even be some false sense of hope, and there could be some real victories. But you've got to look at this not like a war on drugs. We look at like a cancer, but you've got a war on for the soul of your child. And remember, you're going to lose some of these battles in this war. And to accept that early on will help build up some scar tissue as you go through this. And so, not that I want to be a downer, but I want to be direct in that you are in a place right now which is fairly fresh for him reaching adulthood now. And you said, he's in a college environment, which is in no way supportive of a clean, healthy lifestyle, unfortunately. And trust me, I know. I used to work for a speakers network, traveling the country talking about drugs and alcohol on college campuses. When I would do programs on college campuses where students were not forced to be there, nobody showed up. But when I would do them for the fraternity, when I would do them for the fraternities and sororities where they had to be there to get credit, yeah, they're all there to check the box. But the problem is you're dealing with this huge segment of groupthink. And if you don't know what groupthink is, it's one of the things I talk about in my lectures, is that, human beings are very obviously susceptible to doing what others do around them. And it doesn't matter how oftentimes well-raised they are in a home of responsibility. It's just sometimes when they get out into this new circle, this new environment, it is so overwhelming. And trust me, when I ran for office and was knocking on doors, I talked to so many households where we weren't even talking about politics. They were talking about their kids. They were saying, we raised our kids right. We did this. And now we're having all these issues. And I actually was talking to them no longer as a candidate, but I felt like a counselor. And it was so many households today, Lauren, are dealing with this. But I'll tell you what, so many of them are not talking about it outside of their households because they feel shameful. And what you'll realize is there's a huge network of parents out there that are dealing with this individually that are not talking about it because they feel ashamed. And my thing is, you know what? You got to wear it on your sleeve, because once you put it out there, you're going to realize people are going to come to you. And there's others that are out there. Because again, the numbers don't lie. If 1 out of 5 kids are using, that's huge. So the numbers, it might be a little off, but when I used to lecture, we used to have 17 million addicts in this country. And Aubrey, I don't know what the numbers are now because I haven't looked at it in a few years, but let's just say 17 million addicts. 1 of 3 things happens to an addict, according to NA and AA in the recovery. It's jails, institutions, or death, right? Well, death is obviously final. Jails happens to addicts, institutions, treatment facilities. That's where a lot of them are. But for people to understand the phase of how people get into addiction, it's a step. So the first step is just experimentation. You do it for the very first time. They do it somewhere within their friend network. Then they get into the next phase. You step up, which is social use. You're then using it amongst peers. So in college, it's amongst your roommates or your peers. After that second phase so you go experimentation, social use. That third phase is abuse. And abuse is where you can begin you as a parent, caretaker, a loved one, can begin to see the problems. Their grades are going south. They're not going to school. Their physical features might begin to change. That abuse phase, if there's no intervention done at that abuse phase, they will end up in that fourth and final phase, which is as an addict. And that not necessarily means it's a bad thing, right? Because that jail can be a way of intervention, not always. But the recovery, the treatment, that is where a lot of this effort takes place. And so when us in drug prevention, we're actually trying to get them even before they get to step 1. We're trying to get them in the middle schools, talking early on about why these things are bad, don't do them. But if you look at that continuum, people here in this audience watching this, you're going to have friends, family, loved ones that are anywhere along this spectrum. As they continue to climb, step 3, step 4, it is about treatment. So, Lauren, you've got your son in the right place. This is just one step in a journey that is not going to be easy.
Yeah. And I just want to add a little bit to that too, Paul. That is one of the main reasons why I do what I do, because of the lack of knowledge and support, especially for the family. So Every Brain Matters has the pamphlets I break it down, the information simple to use. So when you are going to these doctors, these medical professionals who are not educated on it, you just hand them the pamphlet. Here's the information. Visit the website. Everything's resourced. It's all science-based facts. And then we developed, I was a host mom for Youth in Recovery for 4 years. So we have the support groups for the families. So every Wednesday night, we have an interactive climbers meeting where you come and you ask those hard questions. We have a counselor who leads it. And then we have families that are further down the road on this journey that can share their experience, strength, and hope. So you can form some tools on how, like Paul said, you're in a battle. You're in the battle for your child's life. And I love his honesty. I mean, it hurts. It's painful to hear it, but we have to be honest about this. And, what Paul talks about here is, we don't want them to hit rock bottom. But without some type of accountability, is what he's saying, is there's no opportunity for recovery. There's no opportunity for healing unless there is some kind of roadblocks and accountability. So as parents, what I teach a lot when I'm speaking to parents and I do presentations is I teach them how to hold their kids accountable, because that's really your biggest line of defense. What is the consequence for their behavior? And using marijuana is a self-destructive behavior. So sometimes parents can't wake up from that. And I say, well, if your kid is using Drano every day, what would you do about that? Yeah. Well, I would get them to stop using Drano. Well, how would you do that? So that's what we do in those rooms of recovery, and especially the climbers meeting. And I'll send you some more resources after the meeting for that. And so thank you. And I also love the way Paul was talking about how he drug tests his kid. He knows. I mean, my younger son does not have a substance use disorder. He's been diagnosed with PTSD and depression and anxiety because of the trauma he went through with his other family members from their substance use disorder, from their marijuana addiction. And he went to recovery high school and he was drug tested all 4 years. And it was randomly, and I paid the school a fee every semester. And I was so glad, because he said, yeah, Mom, it gives me a way out when I'm being pushed. And even though he's in a school of recovery, they're still pushing drugs there. I can say no. So I am an advocate for drug testing youth. It does give them accountability, and it does give them a way out. It does work. The science supports it. So
yeah. And here's something that is so hopeful about this. Some of the most genuine, amazing people I have ever met, ever worked with, have been through recovery. It's shameful that we think it's shameful to go through recovery, because it's a disease. And when you look, so many people have gone through different treatment programs and come out of it. So something to, talk to your son or daughter about who is going through treatment is, look, you can save lives on your own. You can be a leader on this. And oh, by the way, you should, wear what you did on your sleeve. I have no shame. Wherever I go, I say, like, I went through drug rehab. Have I been judged negatively for that? Occasionally, yes. But 99.9% of the time, I have not. And despite my drug addiction, I became a police officer, right? I worked in the White House. I joined the Navy. I had top secret clearance. I mean, the sky is the limit. And we're in a point. The good thing about society right now, I think, is much like our veterans are much more open about PTSD and brain injury and getting treatment, right? It wasn't like that 10 or 20 years ago. The Vietnam vets were treated horribly. And so it's a different time in this country where when we talk about trauma, we talk about mental health, there is no longer that negative piece tied to it. In fact, in law enforcement, they'll give you time off in many agencies for mental health. In the military, you are encouraged to talk about it. I openly have PTSD. The military knew about it while I was in, and as long as I was in treatment, working on it and checking the boxes and healthy, everything's fine. And so when I retired as a senior military officer, a commander 05. At my retirement ceremony, there must have been 100 or maybe more personnel there from all different branches. And I would not have said this 20 years ago because I might have been ashamed, right? No, I went right up there. The first thing I said was, hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are all broken. We are. We are all broken. There's only one perfect person that I know of, and he's not on this planet. We are all broken. We all deal with things. We all have mental health issues. Our brains were not developed to be able to take on all these different societal challenges, not to mention, all the screen time. And so when we begin to accept the fact, no matter what age we are, We're all broken. We've all been through experiences. It doesn't have to be drugs or alcohol or war. It's just life. And those life experiences can lead us into different things, good or bad. And so somebody who's in treatment right now, no shame. In fact, what an incredible honor. That's how we got to approach it. It is honorable what you're going through, because what you're going through, when you come out on the other side, you're not done with your journey, but you're going to have other people that are going to be looking up to you, that are going to be coming to you. I can't tell you the number of people that I counseled in high school or college afterwards that would come talk, or people that have reached out to me and said, hey, Paul, I quit drinking, or, whatever it is. It will happen. It will happen. And so for somebody, your loved one who's in treatment right now, give them that mission. They might feel like it's too big a mission for them to take on, but you know what? They've actually been blessed with something really critical, because they will save lives throughout their life as long as they stay in recovery on that right path. And that's how you turn this negative into a positive. It really is about leadership.
I wanted to say thank you, because the reality is definitely something I'm ready to hear. And we are so close to rock bottom. And I have such a stubborn kid. And I know everybody says their kids are stubborn, but I want him to hit that rock bottom, but I don't want to lose him.
That's right.
And so that's where I'm at. And we don't get to choose that, I guess. And that's why I'm here in his college town for 2 weeks. I'm near because, I'm thinking that I can, just being near, I can prevent that, But anyway, I will be looking at all the resources because as a parent, like you say, holding them accountable, getting them the right help. This is going to be a whole new life that I learned too. As you said, it's a lifelong journey. Thankfully, he's my only one. I was one of 9. Can't imagine going through this times 9. And I'm sure, like you say, my higher power has said, you can, I'm going to give this to you. This is your challenge. When you thought you had an emptiness and a life, you're going to have to shift gears and learn, how to navigate this the rest of my life. So.
Yeah, Lauren, you said a few things there. First off, 1 of 9. I thought I recognized you from the Brady Bunch series. So nice to have you on here with us. So here's what's important, though, for the parents, or you are a caregiver in many ways, right? And so you got to take care of yourself emotionally, especially. The military's done something unique that with our veterans that are injured, for the spouses, they turn them into caregivers with support systems and networks. And I'm so glad we do that on the military side. But for the parents like yourselves that are struggling, those resources here, what Aubrey mentioned, you've got to be able to take care of yourself as well. It's like being on an airplane, right? You got to put that mask on and make sure you are healthy and there, and not just so burnt out and depressed. It comes naturally with the battles that we're in, but you've got to take care of yourself emotionally and spiritually strong, because there are demons and enemies that are going to do all they can to split and break. And so put that mask on yourself, take care of yourself every single day, and just accept that you're not only going to look after him while you're there, you've got to look out for yourself as well. So it's really both at the same time.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Cynthia, and I wanted to speak about the healthcare industry, because a lot of the healthcare community, they have not been educated on substance use disorders, and therefore they're not able to provide information or advice or guidance to those that may be coming in for the help. And there's a strong possibility, I believe, that some of the literature that Aubrey is going to be sending out will have the group of doctors that are trying to educate on marijuana, which is phenomenal. And they're educating doctors, and they're trying to just educate the community as a whole. I wish that I would have been able to convince the facility that my husband ended up going to last year for a separate issue regarding, which was something that they were well versed in, were cardiac issues. But I was trying to get them to understand that we needed to work on treating his marijuana usage as well and his alcohol usage as well, and also the underlying issue as to why he was self-medicating. But again, they did not understand. They were just as everything was new to them. And unfortunately, in December, I lost my husband. So and now I'm still here within these walls, within these rooms, because we have a child, and it's our only child, and he's 29, and he is also in these stages. I know he's definitely past experimentation, and he's past, I don't know if he's past social usage yet into abuse. I don't think that his physical features haven't started changing yet, like my husband had, whereby he looked sick and he was definitely in an active addiction and could not get himself out. But I'm hopeful, and I'm praying that things will be different for my son, and also for all our loved ones that are still 6 feet above ground, that something will occur and will click, and the message will get to them, and that they will want help. But just very happy to be here and part of the community. And I'm calling in from Nashville, Tennessee. So I love everybody. And thank you so very much, Paul, for the speaking. It's been phenomenal. I really appreciate all that you're doing. And welcome to Texas, because I'm originally from there. Take care.
Oh, well, thanks, Cynthia. And I'm sorry for your loss. And as you know, you have a burden, unfortunately, before you that you live with, but that burden will save lives because others will hear your testimony. And so it's a burden emotionally, spiritually, and on the family to have a loss, but you're going to save lives tenfold because people will hear this and they will share it. And so everything in life, we got to take these experiences somehow and turn them into ways of opportunities to go forward and know that we went through this, our loved ones went through this. Now we're going to do all we can to share in our best ways, the ways that we can to save lives. And so when you look at the people, Cynthia, that are largely very active in these issues now across this country, they largely have lost or almost lost a loved one. And so it's almost you've been given this incredible burden, but there is also, I think, no better way for it to hit home, for people to wake up, to snapping that rubber band, than to meet or speak or hear testimony from those who've either lost or almost lost a loved one. And so I'm sorry for your loss, but in many ways, grateful that you are here and willing to talk and share that, because others will hear this. So thank you.
Love you, Cynthia. She's laid her husband to rest here in Houston, so we're able to be there. And she's wonderful support to so many families. And the organization she was talking about is Isaac. It's the national, I forget what is it? They're the group of doctors that review. There are science advisors, so they approved my literature. So we're very grateful for them.
And ISAC stands for International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis.
Thank you, Cynthia. I always get that messed up. Okay, well, Paul, any final words from you to this group?
Lastly, look, we're a team, we're a family. In the military, when you go out on the battlefield, you might not be directly connected to somebody that's out there on the same mission. But when you come back off the battlefield, you've all experienced something that brings you together. Oftentimes trauma, can do that. People that were together in 9/11 or whatever it may be. Well, drug addiction, dealing with this is living in trauma. And the best thing you can do is to continue to be in support networks like this. Find these people that are willing to come out, tell their stories, help lead the way. And lastly, I'll just say this. Remember, our ranks are spread so thin that if we were able to dedicate 100% of our time to this always, it would be a little bit different if there were more we could replicate. If we could sprinkle water on Aubrey and replicate everything that she's doing into every single city, man, we wouldn't have the problems we do, but we do because there's not enough of us. And so stay in the fight. This is a journey that never ends here with us. You've been blessed or cursed, however you want to see it, to now be in this fight. But it is a fight now that is so much bigger than us individually. It is about our loved ones. It's about our community. And I'll take a step further as a military veteran. It's about our country. We have adversaries out there from China to Russia that look at us right now, and we look relatively weak. We cannot recruit enough people to join our armed forces. They don't often have, they're not fit for service. And so if we're at a place like that in our country where we got so many people that are using drugs and don't qualify, or there are issues going forward, how strong are we as a country? And so if we love our country, we got to love our kids and our community and make sure that we raise them up right to keep America the greatest beacon on this planet. So we all have home to come back to. So with that, I'll push it back over to Aubrey. God bless you all. And thanks for having me.
Oh, God bless you, Paul. And I can say, I have witnessed Paul, just like him and I at a convention, stopping a policy. I mean,
you did amazing.
I've seen Paul under attack, and I witnessed it. And I saw him handle it with such grace and just such strength. I can't tell you all how much I admire Paul and appreciate all his hard work. And it was when we were just coming out of COVID, and he called me up. He said, "Come on down." And I started educating people, and he literally stopped very harmful policies in a committee one day, and it was beautiful to watch. So thank you, Paul, and thank you.
Team effort. Yeah, it was a great team effort.